Hey there. Today's title is My Daughter Falsely Accused Me, leading to my imprisonment for a long time, and now I've been released. I'll pay her back everything I went through in the same coin. If you enjoy videos like this, kindly subscribe for more. Let's begin. It's hard to even start writing this. Thinking about it makes me so mad, but I need to get it out. My daughter, Lena, has been a handful for as long as I can remember. When she was little, she was sweet but stubborn, nothing out of the ordinary. Things changed when she hit middle school. She started acting like the world owed her something, throwing tantrums and slamming doors over the smallest things. My wife kept saying, "It's just a phase." But Lena never grew out of it. By her teenage years, it felt like she was doing everything in her power to make our lives miserable. She lied constantly, about where she was, who she was with, what she was doing. When the school called about her skipping classes, I told her she needed to straighten up, but she just rolled her eyes. At 16, she announced she was dropping out of school. No matter how much we begged her to reconsider, she wouldn't budge. Soon after, she packed her stuff and left to live with some boyfriend who had no job or future. For 3 years, we didn't hear a single word from her. No calls, no texts, nothing. My wife was crushed, crying herself to sleep most nights, wondering if Lena was okay. I was angry, but, if I'm being honest, I also felt relieved. Without her, there was finally peace in the house. Then one night, out of nowhere, she showed up. It was raining, and she stood on the porch soaking wet, holding a garbage bag of clothes. "I have nowhere else to go," she said. I wanted to shut the door, but my wife rushed past me, pulling Lena inside and hugging her like she'd been gone for years instead of running away. I let her stay, though I knew in my gut it was a mistake. And sure enough, within days, she was back to her old ways. She didn't look for a job or help around the house. She spent all her time on her phone or disappearing for hours without saying where she was going. When I asked her to pitch in, she'd roll her eyes and complain like I was asking for the impossible. My wife made excuses, saying Lena just needed time. But I'd had enough. One night, Lena came home after 1 a.m., looking like she didn't have a care in the world. When I asked where she'd been, she just shrugged. That was it. I told her if she couldn't pull her weight, she needed to leave. She laughed in my face and said, "You're supposed to take care of me. That's what parents do." I gave her 24 hours to pack and get out. My wife tried to argue, but I didn't budge. Lena screamed, slammed her door, and called me a terrible father. It didn't matter anymore. I was done. The next evening, I was sitting in the living room, trying to block out another argument with my wife about Lena, when there was a loud knock at the door. My stomach dropped. When I opened it, there were 3 police officers standing there, looking serious. "Sir, we have a warrant to search your property," one of them said. I froze. "Why?" I asked. They explained there'd been an anonymous tip about drugs in the house, filed under my name. I stood there in shock as they walked past me and started searching. I couldn't believe it. How had things gotten to this point? My wife froze in the hallway, pale as a ghost. Meanwhile, Lena sat on the couch like nothing was happening. She even smirked at me as the officers headed upstairs to search the bedrooms. I didn't have proof, but I knew this was her doing. She'd been sneaking around, staying out late, and hanging with people I didn't trust. Who else would have something to gain by causing this chaos? The officers started with her room, tearing through her things, drawers, sheets, her backpack, but they found nothing. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I'd been wrong. Then they moved to my room. I wasn't worried at first. I wasn't involved in anything illegal, so what could they possibly find? But when one officer pulled back the mattress and held up a bag of heroin, my heart stopped. "That's not mine." I stammered, but they weren't listening. As they searched, they found more bags hidden under my bed. Lena sat there, smirking. No guilt, no fear, just satisfaction. By the time they cuffed me, my wife was crying uncontrollably. Lena? She didn't even flinch. She just sat there, watching like it was all some kind of twisted show. At the station, I kept repeating that the drugs weren't mine, that someone had set me up, but it didn't matter. The evidence was in my house, under my bed. That was enough for them. They denied me bail, saying the amount found suggested I was involved in distribution. I was stuck in jail, waiting for the court's painfully slow process to play out. 5 agonizing months passed. Every single day, I sat in that cell replaying everything, the betrayal, the humiliation. My wife visited me a few times, but instead of standing by me, she seemed lost, like she didn't know what to believe. She asked me once why Lena would do something like that. Her voice was soft, hesitant, as if she couldn't even fathom saying the words out loud. I wanted to yell, but I forced myself to stay calm, even though my hands clenched into fists. I knew the answer: Lena was like this. She lied, manipulated, and twisted things to suit her needs. I told my wife this wasn't new behavior. But she couldn't accept it. She shook her head, looking so small and broken. Planting drugs? Setting me up to be arrested? She thought it was a step too far, something so vile she couldn't believe our daughter was capable of it. I wanted to scream at her that this was years in the making. Lena had been spiraling for a long time, and she had been excused and enabled every step of the way. Instead, I just let the bitterness seep into my voice, making it clear I was done sugarcoating the truth. Her reaction only deepened my frustration. She wasn't just questioning Lena, she was questioning me. At one point, she even suggested maybe I didn't know what was happening, that maybe there was more to the story. That hit me harder than anything else. How could she, my wife of 20 years, doubt me like that? She knew me better than anyone, yet here she was, acting like I might actually be guilty of the very thing destroying my life. I couldn't get Lena's smirk out of my head. The way she just sat there, completely unfazed. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't a mistake or a spur-of-the-moment act, this was planned. She'd hidden the drugs in my room, knowing I'd take the fall. She'd made the anonymous call to the police, ensuring they had a reason to come with a warrant. She had calculated every move, and it had worked. And yet, even with all the pieces falling into place, my wife couldn't, or wouldn't, see it. The doubt, the whispered suspicions from friends and family, the distance that started to grow between me and everyone I cared about, it was almost unbearable. Even my parents didn't believe me. The arrest alone was enough for people to start questioning me. It didn't matter that the drugs weren't mine, that the evidence didn't directly tie me to anything. The stain of it all stuck, and I was left to deal with the fallout alone. It sticks to you like a stain you can't wash off. While the court delayed my hearing over and over again, I sat in that cell, stewing in my anger. I thought about all the times Lena had lied to my face, all the chances I'd given her that she never deserved. I couldn't stop picturing her smirk as the police took me away, the way she seemed so sure of herself, like she had orchestrated everything perfectly. My wife's tears haunted me too, not tears for me, but because she didn't know if she could trust me anymore. By the time I finally got my day in court, I wasn't the same person who had walked into that jail 5 months earlier. I was harder, angrier, less forgiving. The system had failed me. My family had failed me. And it was all because of Lena, my own daughter. When the evidence came to light, Lena's texts, witnesses who'd seen her sneaking around, and the lack of fingerprints or DNA tying me to the drugs, the world suddenly remembered I existed. The charges against me were dropped, but the damage had already been done. 5 months of my life were gone. 5 months where I was treated like a criminal, doubted by the people I thought loved me. Legally, my name was cleared. But socially? Emotionally? I knew I'd never be the same. I wasn't just angry at Lena. I was angry at everyone who had doubted me, who left me to rot in that cell while they questioned whether I could be the kind of man who would hide heroin under his bed. That anger grew into something darker, revenge. I wanted Lena to feel the weight of what she'd done, to lose everything, just like I had. When I got home, I sat in the living room in silence. My wife stood awkwardly by the doorway, probably expecting me to be relieved, maybe even grateful to be back. But all I felt was betrayal. I finally asked her why she hadn't believed me. My voice cracked, and that only made me angrier. I wanted to sound strong, not broken. She said it was hard, that the drugs were found in my room. What else was she supposed to think? I told her she was supposed to know me. After 20 years of marriage, she should have seen through this, known that Lena was capable of something like this. But she hadn't. Instead, she let me sit in jail, doubting me while she focused on protecting the person who had destroyed our lives. She apologized, but it didn't mean anything. Sorry didn't erase the months I'd lost or the fact that she hadn't stood by me when it mattered most. Over the next few days, I tried to piece my life back together. The investigation finally confirmed what I'd known all along: Lena was behind everything. Her text messages painted a damning picture. She'd been dealing drugs for months, hiding her stash under my bed because she thought it was the perfect cover. Witnesses came forward, saying they'd seen her sneaking around, meeting with sketchy people in dark alleys. One of her so-called friends even admitted that Lena had bragged about setting me up. When the police issued a warrant for her arrest, I felt a mix of relief and bitterness. Relief because they were finally targeting the real culprit, and bitterness because it had taken so long, and I had paid the price for her actions. Lena was arrested a few days after I came home. She was found holed up in a rundown apartment with other lowlifes. The police discovered more drugs, cash, and everything they needed to confirm her involvement in the drug trade. But when they took her away, she didn't look scared or ashamed. She looked annoyed, like she was inconvenienced. My wife, of course, was devastated. She kept repeating that Lena was still our daughter, as if that somehow justified everything. I couldn't take it anymore. I told her that Lena wasn't my daughter, not anymore. The court process was long and grueling, and each hearing chipped away at whatever humanity I still had left. Lena's lawyer argued that her actions were driven by addiction, that she wasn't in her right mind. But I knew better. This wasn't desperation. It wasn't a mistake. It was calculated, deliberate. Lena had never been the type to care about family. She never thought about anyone but herself. And as I sat in that courtroom, watching her smug expression, I realized she never would. This wasn't about drugs. It was about revenge. Lena wanted to hurt me, to punish me for kicking her out. That much was clear. But I kept those thoughts to myself. The truth was already laid bare for everyone to see. Her actions spoke louder than anything I could have said. The trial dragged on for months, delayed repeatedly by procedural nonsense and her lawyer's attempts to reduce her charges. Meanwhile, I tried to rebuild the wreckage of my life. People in the neighborhood still whispered when I walked by. Some of them weren't convinced of my innocence, even with the evidence in my favor. At home, my wife seemed to live in constant denial. She kept repeating that Lena was sick, as if saying it enough times would make it easier to bear. One night after dinner, I snapped. She tried to convince me that Lena hadn't meant to do this, but I couldn't hold back anymore. I told her Lena knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just using drugs, she was dealing. And she had deliberately put my name in a report to the police. How could anyone not mean that? But my wife clung to the idea that we were her parents, no matter what. I couldn't take it. I told her Lena wasn't my daughter anymore. Not after what she had done. When the verdict finally came, it felt more like a formality than a victory. Lena was found guilty of all charges: possession of narcotics, intent to distribute, and filing false accusations. The judge didn't hold back. Instead of prison, though, she was sentenced to 8 years in a long-term drug rehabilitation center. The judge believed that addressing her addiction was crucial to prevent her from repeating her actions. Lena barely reacted to the sentence. She shrugged, as if to say, "It is what it is." I didn't feel relief. The damage had already been done. 8 years wouldn't give me back the 5 months I'd spent in a cell. It wouldn't fix my shattered relationships or erase the stain on my reputation. After the trial, I filed for a restraining order against Lena. I didn't want her anywhere near me again, not now, not ever. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. I couldn't sleep for weeks. I kept waking up in the middle of the night, haunted by everything that had happened. My wife, on the other hand, seemed stuck in the past. She started writing Lena letters, trying to maintain some kind of relationship. At first, I didn't say anything. But one night, when I saw her sealing another envelope, I couldn't hold back. I asked her what she was hoping to accomplish. She gave me the same answer she always did: Lena was our daughter. But I couldn't see it that way anymore. To me, Lena had stopped being my daughter the moment she had me arrested. I didn't care what she was going through or if she ever got better. She was out of my life, and that wasn't going to change. That conversation was the tipping point. My wife and I were no longer on the same page, or even in the same book. She clung to the image of the daughter we used to know, the little girl she had raised. But that version of Lena didn't exist anymore, not to me, and maybe not to anyone. It became clear that our marriage wouldn't survive this. The trust between us was gone, eroded by months of doubt, anger, and pain. She had doubted me when I needed her most, and now she was trying to hold on to a relationship with the person who had destroyed everything we had built. There was no coming back from that. One night, after yet another argument about Lena, I finally said it out loud. I told her I didn't think we could keep doing this. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, asking if I wanted to leave. I told her it wasn't about wanting to leave, it was about the fact that this wasn't working anymore. We weren't the same people we had been before. I didn't trust her. She didn't understand me. And I couldn't stay in that house, surrounded by reminders of Sarah and everything we had lost. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. She said she didn't want this, but she understood. We agreed to separate a few weeks later. She kept the house, the one place I couldn't stand to be, and I moved into a small apartment across town. Far enough to start fresh, but close enough to deal with the practicalities of dividing our lives. The worst part wasn't the physical separation. It was the realization that the life we had built together had crumbled so completely. 20 years of partnership, of raising a family, of building a home, gone in the wake of Lena's actions. Lena hadn't just destroyed my trust in her. She had destroyed my marriage. The jail time, the trial, none of that was the worst part. The worst part was realizing that the life I thought I had wasn't as strong as I believed. My marriage had been hanging by a thread, and I hadn't even seen it until it was too late. Maybe someday I'll let go of the anger. But not today. Today, all I can do is focus on putting one foot in front of the other and keeping Lena as far away from me as possible. She made her choices, and she'll live with the consequences. But so will I.